Hey, good afternoon. Actually, wherever you're coming from, looks like March 1st. So I think it's Wednesday, March 1st, 2022 at 11:48 my time. And, it's been an interesting couple of days. I mean, we're approaching on TikTok 240,000 views and a ton of feedback, mostly really inspiring feedback. I want to encourage all of you who have experienced anything with the housing collapse or have known anybody in the housing collapse and how it's impacted your life, please share your story with us. I also encourage all of you. We've seen this incredible traffic on TikTok, and we've seen a lot of new interest in a YouTube page that we created called Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs the Con. And most of these longer form videos, editorials, that's what they are, they're video editorials, from me, a guy who was a muckraker, investigative journalist, producer, who happened to put together the biggest story of the last 70 years and maybe in history that nobody's paying attention to. And I know it sounds absolutely absurd for those of you who don't understand the system, but that's the problem, is nobody understands the system. So, I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible because I think we've got a ton of momentum, and I really appreciate everybody out there. What I'm trying to do personally is to try to create a cathartic experience with everybody out there who's experienced being on the downside of an economy that's collapsed or in a country that's failed them, and try to get them the ABCs of what actually happened to them. They can finally understand, oh my God, this is what happened to me. And then I'm trying to get us all together, unified, to be able to hopefully become a movement. And I think of it as a civil rights like movement to purge corruption, because I'm trying to create the great, well, I'm just going to say the resurrection, hashtag the resurrection, that reconstitutes what the United States has always supposed to be and was for a good portion of our history. Different times it wasn't, but it really hasn't been over the course of the last 40 years. And that's the thing I'm trying to get you all to understand. So, I started off one of my posts earlier, and again, before I finish off with that, please check me out on TikTok. I'm Patrick Level One. You can check out the con. You can check out hashtag the con. You can check out our television series, which is the most important aspect of all of this, at www.thecon.tv. And we have our series, which is a 5-part series that you can rent, or you can get a lot of free information by just going to a video tab and scrolling down and getting a lot of information about how our system works. I think we've set the cost at like $2, I think, per episode. I'm not getting paid by this. I've already gotten paid to produce this. I made a deal with my executive producer a long time ago. We were partners, but then I had to sign over all of the IP to him because ultimately I had to get the budget to be able to finish this stuff. And I always thought we'd wind up on Netflix or HBO and we'd live happily ever after, but that didn't happen. And the main reason I think that didn't happen, and I'm only speculating, but I think it has a lot to do with it. All of the major financial entities that we expose in the con, they literally rule the United States. They rule the globe, and several of them, particularly that I talk about quite a bit in some of my op-ed editorials, video editorials, is a company called BlackRock. Many of you probably have never heard of BlackRock, but BlackRock basically runs the world, and there's a reason why they run the world, and they run the world on behalf of the United States. And that's something you can get to from things that I've produced. And there's other companies, of course. Some of you may be familiar with them, maybe some of you aren't. But companies like Goldman Sachs, or many of our financial institutions, starting with our too big to fail banks like Chase and Bank of America and Wells Fargo, and things that broker down from there, investment banks and hedge funds and all sorts of other different things in the space like private equity. But what I'm trying to pull the veil up to make you guys understand, and I always set it up with one of my favorite quotes from a television, or not a television, but a film back in the 90s, when Kevin Spacey said in this great film, it's called The Usual Suspects, he said the greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the world he didn't exist. That's what we're dealing with. And what we're dealing with is this kind of smoke and mirrors about a complex machinery of a financial system that operates in a way that nobody understands. And over the course of 40 years, they've pulled a coup d'etat. So, for example, on my Facebook post today, I asked, people, what are they more alarmed by? What are they more shocked by? What are they more concerned by? President Vladimir Putin and Russia invading Ukraine, which obviously is all over the place with the images of bloody war and everything that constitutes, not to mention the run in global markets and everything that constitutes, was very scary, not to mention an elevated nuclear threat from Putin himself, and maybe his mind's not in the right place, but um, that is shocking. But would that be more shocking than to learn that after 4 to 5 decades of what we call neoliberalism and financialization, that Wall Street pulled a coup d'etat, our financial system? Wall Street is our financial system. It's all of those things that I said at the top of this podcast, op-ed, whatever you want to call it, videogram, that constitutes hedge funds and private equity and investment banks and commercial banks and all of these things and their apparatus and what they do to create fuel, quite frankly, in the system through the Federal Reserve through them. And what if I were to tell you, in contrast to Vladimir Putin and Russia um, invading Ukraine, that Wall Street literally has pulled a coup d'etat in the United States. So, for example, the United States is supposed to be separation of powers, where the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch are all independent of one another, and they all provide checks and balances so that one doesn't have too much power. And we created a long time ago a financial system that's supposed to manage itself because we have this notion of laissez-faire capitalism and supply and demand, and that the market will figure it out. Well, what they figured out was how to hijack the United States. We're not separation of powers. Everybody is working for the machinery of the financial system. And the financial system works a specific way where it's literally fueled by the Federal Reserve through this monster, what a lot of people refer to as a casino, that just has become a fraud enterprise, honestly. It's smoke and mirrors, it's a mythical economy, and it gets even worse because as a result of the 2008 Great Financial Crisis, and really before that, going back to really killing the golden goose back in the 70s and the 80s, where we got rid of our manufacturing capacity and we became a service company, country, I should say, and we became the middleman. Really, we got rid of our manufacturing base and the ability for the country to produce what it consumes. Really, so we created these supply chains all over the world because money chased the least expensive places to produce certain things with no regulation, and that constitutes a lot of the stuff that we have to deal with climate change and that sort of thing. And ultimately, who got rich were the middlemen, right? Particularly oligarchs or people who run countries around the world, because they're in on it as well. But ultimately, this globalism wasn't about a rising tide raises all ships. It's about ultimately those that are the highest of the pecking order, people such as Putin, can literally run ramshot and exploit countries and then launder their money through this incredibly corrupt financial system, and it's created just an absolute disaster. And in this process, not only did Wall Street hijack the United States government, where they basically corrupted the entire apparatus to where the law does not have integrity because it doesn't hold this bad behavior, criminal behavior to account. That's because of revolving door. And then on top of it, they basically just betrayed the whole notion of supply and demand. It's not supply and demand. In fact, it's even worse than that because the Federal Reserve can buy back through what they call, quantitative easing. They can buy back bonds that literally could be made up of sawdust. And I swear to God, through stock buybacks and zombie companies and all sorts of things that we constitute in the con, that's what they've done. And they've done that for about 13 years to the tune of literally $50 trillion has been pumped into the system. I think the United States citizens have seen something like $3.5 trillion in the CARES Act, between 2020 and 2021, and everybody's kind of familiar with that. But we've put so much money into the system, and the only ones that have actually figured this out in a way to present to the American people is our production. And it's in the con at www.thecon.tv. So to try to finish the thought, what makes you more concerned? 40 years of hijacking the country that led to tens of millions of people around the world being devastated through a corrupt machine that used our courts to basically foreclose upon millions of people illegally, or an invasion of Ukraine. I mean, honestly, I'm not saying that the invasion of Ukraine isn't shocking. If it could lead to World War III because of increasing to nuclear arms and the whole globe being on this in this very precarious situation because of this incredible globalism that's run unchecked, that's fueled oligarchs around the world. It could be the end, and maybe this is the way it ends. But before it ends, and nobody's the wiser, so that it doesn't reconstitute itself after maybe half of humanity perishes, and I hope that's not the case. But strange things have happened throughout history, and we might be at one of those moments. But I assure you, the truth is in the con. It's a step-by-step process to show who did what, when, and how, and who covered it up to create the largest criminal enterprise in history that never ended. And who am I? I'm Patrick Lovell. I'm honestly the only person that exists that's willing to go to the distance to tell you how it works in a way that you can understand. There's so many different types of people out there talking in hyperbole, or they're talking about things and platitudes and confusing rhetoric and dialogue and things that just run circles around you because they can't reveal the system. I don't know why they don't have the courage to do it. I know there's a lot of people in our political apparatus that know exactly how this thing works, but they haven't done it. And a lot of these people have been around, our senators and our representatives for decades. Anybody who's been there for decades has been in on this. And, they constantly try to, put Band-Aids on the sinking, Titanic. I mean, it's just a joke. And all this does is just fuels people above the line, those who have the most assets, really the richest amongst us. And it has nothing to do with success. I mean, it's just the way the system's baked in right now. And they've destroyed a whole generation of people, myself included. So thank you to all of you that have checked in, that are constantly coming back here. We really, really need to come together if we have a chance to save ourselves from ourselves. A lot of people want to, put the blame on a boogeyman overseas. I promise you, the biggest enemy we have is this financial system that has completely hijacked the United States of America and betrayed every single thing that we're supposed to be. I know that's strong language. That's how dire this situation is. And I just am tired as a citizen of the United States, particularly because we've got all the answers, or at least enough to be able to make everybody aware of how the system works. There's all sorts of variables that go on from there. I can promise you in 2019, a whole slew of new things happened. And this crime constantly reinvents itself, but morphing from the same ecosystem. Okay? So anyway, I think that's enough for today, but I encourage you to check out Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs the Con on YouTube. Please tell everybody you know who's been devastated by this stuff to come and try to find the truth. And I hope we can all come together, because if we can all come together, for people who really do triumph liberty and justice for all, for those who care about equality, those who care about dynamism, those who care about a country that works of, by, and for the people instead of, by, and for the corruption, we can't fix any problem in this country without purging corruption. And there's a way to do it. It's the way it's always been done. And it's in the con, and it leads to what we could do, because we know all the people who are actually the right people to get this thing done. But I just need to somehow stimulate a massive tidal wave of people who are fed up and who trust me, because I swear to God to you, they're all lying to you. Who am I? Again, I'm Patrick Lovell. I'm just a regular guy. I'm nobody special. I just had the good fortune to go on this incredible journey that took years and years and years to pull off, talking to people much smarter than myself, people that have been in the system for decades, who know this stuff inside and out, that could fix this if we could give them the chance. But the only way you can get there is if you understand how this whole thing works and we all collectively come together. So think about a couple of hashtags before I leave. Hashtag Patrick Lovell on TikTok, hashtag the con, hashtag the resurrection, hashtag justifiably furious, Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs the Con on YouTube, and then you can find me on Facebook and Twitter and quite frankly Instagram, all of the different social media. So I hope to connect with you guys. I would love to learn more about your stories. And it's exciting, but at the same time, it's also frustrating. But we literally, the only way we can make this happen is if millions of us are on the same page, maybe tens of millions of us. So thank you for listening. I wish you a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Be well.